Archaeologists open a mass grave in China. What they found inside shocked the world. There are archaeological discoveries that send chills down your spine at first glance. There are secrets buried for thousands of years that, once unearthed, completely overturn everything we thought we knew. There are skeletons, mummies, and ancient structures that only grow more puzzling the deeper scientists study them. And there are stories that, no matter how advanced modern science becomes, still cannot be fully explained. Are these merely coincidences of history, or fragments of a much greater truth that humanity has yet to uncover? And what would happen if all of these mysteries were revealed at once? Welcome to the Ancient History Channel, where we don't just recount the past, but dig into the hidden corners that history itself has tried to conceal. Today, our journey won't follow an ordinary path. Instead, you'll be guided across distant lands, from sheer cliffs where mummies hang suspended in midair, to ancient tombs that hold unexplained and mysterious deaths. Some discoveries may seem simple at first, but the deeper you look, the more unsettling details begin to emerge, raising a haunting question. Did ancient people truly understand things that we, even today, have yet to grasp? Each location is a piece of the puzzle. Every skeleton, every mummy, every strange structure is telling a story. And when those pieces come together, you may realize something even more disturbing. The history we know might only be the tip of the iceberg. So, are you ready to explore with me? If you are, then let's begin right now. 4,100-year-old tomb in China reveals one of the most brutal beheading massacres of the Neolithic era. In northeastern China, in Honghe Village, Heilongjiang Province, a discovery has sent chills through the archaeological community. A 4,100-year-old mass grave, first uncovered in the 1990s. However, it wasn't until multiple excavation campaigns, 6 in total, that the full story began to emerge. And what archaeologists found was far from an ordinary burial site. Instead, it was the haunting evidence of one of the largest known beheading massacres from the Neolithic period in China. According to research published in September, based on skeletal analysis, scientists identified at least 43 individuals at the site. Of these, 32 were most likely killed in a single event. In other words, a mass killing. But what makes this discovery even more chilling is that all the victims were women and children. There was no trace of adult men, no signs of a balanced battle. So it raises a disturbing question. What happened to the men of this village at that time? The evidence preserved in the bones tells a grim story. Many skeletons were found without heads, and notably, the cervical vertebrae showed deep-cut marks consistent with sharp force trauma. This confirms that these were not natural deaths or simple ritual practices. It was deliberate, violent execution. Researchers believe the attackers used handheld weapons, possibly sharpened stone tools, to carry out the beheadings in a brutal and decisive manner. Professor Qian Wang of Texas A&M University, the lead author of the study, explains that throughout history and prehistory, beheading was not merely a method of killing, it was also a symbol of power and conflict. Leaders or enemies were often targeted, not just to be eliminated, but to seize their spirit or energy. It may sound like a spiritual ritual, but in reality, it reflects the savage nature of ancient warfare. Although it's impossible to reconstruct every moment of what happened over 4 millennia ago, scientists have proposed a likely scenario. The people of Honghe were probably a community that survived through hunting, fishing, and farming, a way of life that may seem peaceful but often led to conflict when resources were scarce. It's possible they had previously clashed with neighboring tribes, even attacking and beheading rivals in earlier conflicts. And then, retaliation came. While the men of the village were away, perhaps hunting or trading, an enemy group may have quietly approached. They didn't strike immediately. Instead, they waited for the right moment when only women and children remained. Then, the attack began. There was no defense, no resistance. The most vulnerable became the targets. The massacre unfolded quickly, ruthlessly, and with almost no survivors. When the remaining villagers and male members eventually returned, they were met with a scene beyond comprehension. According to Wang, they gathered the bodies, placed them into 2 houses, buried them in a simple manner, and then left. There were no elaborate rituals, no gravestones, just a hurried farewell marked by grief and fear. But the horror doesn't end there. Archaeologists also uncovered a deeply disturbing detail. 4 skulls were found in a separate pit, with no accompanying bodies. This has led many to believe these may have been trophies from previous battles, brought by the attackers to Honghe, perhaps as a display of power or a form of psychological intimidation. Interestingly, similar discoveries have been made near Lake Baikal in eastern Siberia. The tribes there also lived by hunting and fishing, much like the Honghe people, suggesting that patterns of violent conflict may have been widespread across vast regions during that time. Moreover, research published by Cambridge University Press indicates that during the Shang Dynasty, 1600 to 1046 BCE, beheading became so prevalent that human heads themselves were considered valuable objects. They were not only seen as symbols of victory, but were also tied to the belief that a headless spirit could not return to seek revenge. As you can see, what begins as an act of violence can gradually evolve into a cultural belief system. History is not just about triumphs and achievements, it is also filled with buried tragedies. And the 4,100-year-old tomb in Honghe, northeastern China, stands as a chilling reminder of humanity's darker side, a darkness that existed long before we even had the words to describe it. Giant stone traps of the ancient people in the Middle Eastern deserts. In the 1920s, pilots from the Royal Air Force, while flying over the vast arid deserts stretching across Israel, Jordan, and Egypt, unexpectedly spotted strange shapes on the ground, structures that looked like enormous kites spread across the desert. At the time, no one knew exactly what they were, but the discovery opened the door to one of the most fascinating archaeological stories about the hunting ingenuity of ancient humans. As researchers continued their investigations, they realized that these desert kites were not limited to a few isolated locations. Instead, they were scattered across a vast region, stretching from the Arabian Peninsula and the Sinai Peninsula all the way to southeastern Turkey. Thousands of these structures have been documented, forming a massive network that, when viewed from above, looks like mysterious markings etched into the ground thousands of years ago. So what exactly are these kites? If you were standing on the ground, you might not notice anything unusual. But from a broader perspective, their structure becomes clear. The tail consists of two low stone walls, varying in thickness and height, extending for hundreds of yards, and in some cases, several miles. These walls gradually converge, forming a V-shape or funnel, leading to an endpoint connected to an earthen enclosure or a large circular pit ranging from a few yards to several hundred yards in diameter. By now, you can probably guess their purpose. Yes, archaeological evidence shows that these were enormous hunting traps, among the largest large-scale hunting systems ever created by ancient humans. Instead of hunting animals one by one, people devised a method to drive entire herds into traps, a strategy that was both ingenious and astonishing. The clearest evidence came in 2011, when a team of archaeologists from Israel and the United States excavated a large pit in northeastern Syria. There, they uncovered a significant quantity of bones belonging to the goitered gazelle, dating back to the 4th millennium BCE. This discovery not only confirmed the function of the kites, but also showed that they were used for large-scale hunting after the Neolithic period. Most of these structures were built between 4000 and 2000 BCE, although some are even older, dating back as far as 8000 BCE. This means that humans had already mastered highly organized, large-scale cooperative hunting remarkably early, something not often associated with prehistoric societies. Ancient people did not build these traps randomly. They carefully selected highly strategic locations, flat terrains situated between natural depressions or dry riverbeds, where animals could be easily funneled into a no-escape situation. In some areas, instead of using earthen enclosures, they dug deep pits ranging from about 20 to 50 feet. These pits were designed with gently sloping sides, allowing animals to fall in easily, but making it extremely difficult for them to climb back out. Even this small detail reveals the remarkable level of planning and sophistication involved. But there's more. Many of the stone walls were divided into smaller segments, creating pathways that disoriented the herd and prevented escape. During a hunt, a group of people would work together to drive animals, usually gazelles, along the stone walls. As they ran, the space would narrow, their speed would increase, and eventually they would lose control, rushing straight into the final enclosure, where they either fell into pits or were trapped and killed in large numbers. It may sound simple, but in reality, this was an activity that required coordination among many individuals. After the hunt, they would skin the animals, process the meat, and transport it back to their settlements. This was not just hunting, it was a large-scale food supply system for entire communities. What's striking is that this method of hunting gazelles continued for thousands of years, even into the 19th and early 20th centuries. However, overhunting eventually drove the goitered gazelle, once abundant in the wild, to near extinction. Today, only small populations survive in protected reserves. And yet, when we look back at the full story, these stone kites are more than just archaeological remains. They are evidence of human intelligence, creativity, and the profound impact humans have had on nature for thousands of years. A seemingly simple invention, powerful enough to reshape entire ecosystems. Fascinating, isn't it? The skeleton of a woman with the genes of a man. Just imagine this. What if one day scientists told you that a skeleton buried as a woman for 2,000 years was actually male? Would you believe it? This isn't a hypothesis. It's a real discovery, made in London. But what makes this case truly remarkable isn't just the DNA result. It's the mysterious life of this individual, someone who lived in an ancient society that even today we may not fully understand. It all began in 1979, when archaeologists excavated a skeleton on Harper Road in London. At first, there was no reason for doubt. From the pelvis to the skull, everything indicated that the remains belonged to a woman until modern DNA technology stepped in. Years later, a research team from the British Museum, along with other scientific institutions, began analyzing the DNA of several ancient skeletons. Out of more than 20,000 remains in storage, they selected 4 representative samples to study the population makeup of Roman-era London in greater depth. And then came a shocking discovery. This skeleton, long believed to be female, actually carried male chromosomes. According to scientists, cases like this are extremely rare, occurring in only a small number of births out of every 1,000, when a biological male may develop traits similar to a female, or vice versa. This individual appears to be one of those rare cases, dating back more than 2 millennia. Analysis suggests that this person lived between approximately 50 and 70 BCE and died at the age of about 26 to 35. A relatively young age. Chemical testing of the teeth revealed that she was born in Britain, while her maternal ancestry traced back to Northern Europe. This indicates that even in ancient times, London was already a place of significant cultural exchange. And indeed, research shows that Roman London was just as diverse as many modern cities. People of European descent made up only about 45% of the population, and more than 100 different languages were spoken across its neighborhoods. Think about that, an ancient city that multicultural is truly astonishing. Returning to the individual herself, scientists have even reconstructed aspects of her appearance. She likely had brown eyes and dark brown hair, a fairly typical look. But what makes her story truly extraordinary is not just her genetics but how she was buried. She was placed in a wooden coffin, a burial method that was far from simple. At her feet lay a necklace, possibly used to signify her identity as female. In addition, there was a vessel placed near her head and a bronze mirror positioned by her feet. These items were not random. They suggest that she held a relatively high status in society and was treated with respect. From a morphological standpoint, all the evidence indicates that she was female. However, DNA analysis revealed that she carried both X and Y chromosomes, meaning that genetically, she was male. And this is where the mystery deepens. Scientists have proposed a hypothesis involving a condition known as androgen insensitivity syndrome, a disorder in which a person with male chromosomes develops external characteristics typical of a female. However, the available data is not sufficient to confirm this as the definitive explanation. This raises a profound question. How did this individual truly live in that society? As a man? As a woman? Or as something that even today we are still trying to define? Unfortunately, those questions remain unanswered. But here's something worth thinking about. Even without direct evidence of her behavior or social role, the burial artifacts speak volumes. She was not rejected. On the contrary, she appears to have been accepted, perhaps even respected, by her community. And that suggests something powerful. Even in ancient times, people may have held far more complex and humane perspectives than we often assume. The skeleton of a medieval girl, burned for suspected witchcraft. There's something deeply unsettling about this in the Middle Ages. Sometimes the most frightening thing wasn't death itself, but how people treated one another after death. And the story that took place at San Calocero in the city of Albenga, Italy, is a striking example, one that leaves anyone who hears it with lingering questions. At this site, Italian archaeologists discovered the remains of a medieval teenage girl under extremely unusual circumstances. She was not buried according to normal rites. Instead, her body was thrown into a deep pit and covered with heavy stone slabs, as if someone wanted to keep her trapped beneath the earth forever. Doesn't that seem strange? Why would someone already dead still be treated as a danger? According to researchers, the burial method itself is clear evidence. This girl was considered a threat even in death, and notably, this was not an isolated case in the area. Earlier, in September 2014, at the same location, a research team led by Professor Felipe Pergola from the Pontifical Institute of Christian Archaeology uncovered another skeleton, that of a 13-year-old girl. She had been buried face down with her face turned toward the ground, a highly unusual practice often reserved for those believed to be deviant or dangerous. If you look deeper into this period, you'll find that such burial practices were not uncommon. People sometimes placed bricks in the mouths of the dead, drove stakes through their bodies, or even severed heads and limbs. The sole purpose was to prevent them from coming back. In both cases at San Calicero, whether burying the body face down or weighing it down with heavy stones, the meaning was the same: to stop those suspected of being witches from rising again. Further analysis of the 13-year-old girl revealed that she suffered from scurvy, a condition caused by a lack of vitamin C. But in the Middle Ages, when medical knowledge was limited, symptoms such as pale skin and physical weakness could easily be misinterpreted as signs of something sinister. Think about it. When people cannot understand illness, how do they explain it? Returning to the newly discovered skeleton at San Calicero, scientists estimate that this girl died between the ages of 15 and 17, with a height of only about 4 feet 9 inches. A small, frail body, and perhaps that very frailty made her the target of fear within her community. According to archaeologist Stefano Roacchio, the team is still awaiting radiocarbon dating results, but initial findings suggest the burial took place sometime between the 9th and 15th centuries. This means the remains could be even older than the case discovered in 2014. What makes the story even more haunting are the burn marks found on her body. According to anthropologist Elena Delu, the girl had been burned at an unknown location before being brought to San Calicero in a severely charred condition. Notably, the body tissues appear to have been burned while still soft, suggesting that the burning may have occurred before death or immediately afterward. In other words, no one can say for certain whether she was still alive when the flames began. After being burned, her body was transported and buried hastily. There was no ceremony, no preparation. She was simply carried, thrown into a pit, and covered with heavy stones. The position of the body reflects this clearly. Her head was pressed against the side of the pit, forcing her neck downward, with her chin nearly touching her chest. It's an image that sends a chill down the spine just to imagine. Preliminary analysis also indicates that she suffered from parotid hyperestosis, a condition linked to severe anemia and malnutrition. Her skull and the areas around her eyes show abnormal porous lesions, signs of a body weakened by deprivation. Weak tooth enamel further suggests that she endured a childhood marked by prolonged nutritional deficiency. When you piece everything together, a small body, pale complexion, visible signs of illness, possibly accompanied by bruising, you begin to understand why those around her were afraid. In their eyes, she was no longer an ordinary girl, but something that should not exist. And so they labeled her a witch. No one knows whether the two girls in this story were related, not even the scientists. But whatever the answer may be, they were both victims of a time when fear and lack of understanding could determine a person's fate. 600-year-old chapel in Scotland, where witches were imprisoned and burned alive. You know, our world is a fascinating place. Some locations seem mysterious and mystical on the surface, yet turn out to be completely ordinary. Others appear perfectly normal at first glance, but have witnessed some of the darkest chapters in history. The St. Mary's Chapel, located inside St. Nicholas Church in the city of Aberdeen, Scotland, is one such place. Few would imagine that behind the chapel's ancient walls once stood a prison for people accused of witchcraft hundreds of years ago. St. Mary's Chapel was built in the 15th century, and according to historical records, it served not only as a religious space, but also as a place where suspected witches were detained and put on trial. In particular, During the period known as the Great Witch Hunt in Aberdeen in 1597, a total of 23 women and 1 man were brought here for trial. There's a small detail here that sends a chill down your spine: a metal ring fixed to the chapel's northern wall. It's only about 2 inches in diameter, nothing remarkable at first glance. But according to researchers, this ring was used to shackle those accused of witchcraft during their imprisonment. Arthur Winfield, who led the church restoration project, once said that to the naked eye, it seems ordinary. But when compared with historical records, its meaning becomes something entirely different. So what caused so many people to be labeled as witches at the time? According to historian Chris Crowley from the University of Aberdeen, it all stemmed from a turbulent period in history. After James VI passed the Witchcraft Act 1563, the persecution and trial of suspected witches spread rapidly across Scotland. Later, when he became James I in 1603, these beliefs spread even further. In reality, the witch-hunting wave was not limited to Scotland. It began in Europe in the 15th century, spread to Scotland in the 1590s, and eventually crossed the Atlantic to the Americas in the 17th century. The result was infamous trials such as the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts, United States, where many people were convicted based solely on belief and fear. During that time, both Protestants and Catholics believed that witches were connected to the devil. And sometimes, all it took was unusual behavior, a rumor, or even a personal conflict for someone to be put on trial. One of the most famous cases in Aberdeen in 1597 involved a mother and her son. The mother, Jane Wishart, faced 18 charges related to witchcraft, from allegedly casting spells that made neighbors ill to being accused of controlling a mysterious brown dog that attacked her son-in-law after an argument. She was even accused of cutting off the limbs of a hanged corpse to use in magical rituals. Just hearing these accusations gives you a sense of how severe they were. Her son, Thomas Laius, did not escape either. He was accused of leading a group of witches, organizing midnight dances with the devil at Aberdeen's fish market. In the end, both mother and son were strangled before being burned at the stake, a brutal punishment suffered by many at the time. Fast forward to modern times, between 2006 and 2007, a major archaeological excavation took place on the eastern side of St. Nicholas Church, before the site was renovated into a community center as part of the Kirk of St. Nicholas project. Archaeologists hoped to find remains of those accused of witchcraft, but the results surprised many. No remains of witches were found. Instead, more than 2,000 skeletons were discovered buried beneath the eastern floor of the church. Most of them dated to before the 1560s, the time when the Protestant Reformation in Scotland began to prohibit burials inside churches. So where were the accused witches actually buried? Or were they erased entirely from history, leaving behind no trace at all? That question still lingers to this day, unanswered. But one thing is clear: the story of St. Mary's Chapel is more than just an archaeological discovery. It is a reminder that in the past, fear and blind belief could turn a sacred place into a prison and transform ordinary people into criminals in the blink of an eye. Terrifying, isn't it? 8 million dog mummies in a tomb dedicated to an ancient Egyptian god. Millions of animal mummies buried solely to honor a god. Sounds like something out of a fantasy movie, right? But surprisingly, this is a real story that took place at Saqqara, part of ancient Memphis in Egypt, one of the oldest and most mysterious burial grounds in the world. As you may know, the ancient Egyptians were famous for their deep belief in the afterlife. Among the many gods they worshipped, one name stands out: Anubis, the god of death, depicted with the head of a jackal. To show their devotion, they didn't just build temples for him, they also constructed massive catacombs nearby. And recently, when archaeologists excavated these underground chambers, they were astonished to discover nearly 8 million dog mummies inside, ranging from puppies to fully grown dogs, packed densely beneath the ground. Yes, you heard that right. Millions of mummies laid one after another in dark, maze-like tunnels stretching deep underground. Even more remarkably, it wasn't just dogs. Archaeologists also found mummies of other animals, including jackals, foxes, falcons, cats, and even mongooses. This reveals that animal worship in ancient Egyptian culture wasn't limited to a single species. It was part of a complex and widespread belief system. However, not all of these mummies have survived intact. Many have deteriorated or broken down over time. Some of the damage was caused by tomb robbers, but more surprisingly, there was a period when people actually dug up these mummies to use as fertilizer for agriculture. When you hear that, doesn't it highlight a striking contrast between the sacred beliefs of the past and how these remains were treated later? Looking back in history, in 1897, French archaeologist Jacques de Morgan mapped 2 dog mummy catacombs in Memphis. Over time, however, one of them, the smaller tunnel, became inaccessible, buried under desert sands, and further affected by an earthquake in 1992. As a result, modern researchers have focused their efforts on the larger catacomb to better understand this mystery. The lead researcher, Paul Nicholson from the Cardiff University, spent years analyzing both the stone structure and the mummies within. He explained that when you visit Saqqara today, you'll see a vast desert landscape with towering pyramids and a few visible monuments related to animal worship. But hidden beneath the surface lies an entirely different world. This catacomb is believed to have been built around the 4th century BCE. And here's an especially fascinating detail. On the ceiling of the tunnels, scientists discovered a fossil of a marine vertebrate dating back about 48 million years. This raises an intriguing question. Did the ancient Egyptians notice the fossil when they built the structure, or was it simply a secret left behind by nature? Inside the catacomb, exploration is far from easy. According to Nicholson, it's a long, dark tunnel system with almost no natural light at the entrance. To go deeper, you must rely on artificial lighting. Just imagine stepping inside, surrounded by darkness, confined spaces, and millions of mummies lining the walls. What would that feel like? Honestly, I love exploration, but something like this might make me think twice. The biggest question now is, why did the ancient Egyptians mummify dogs in such enormous numbers? Many researchers believe these animals were bred and sacrificed as offerings to Anubis, serving as a way to send prayers to the afterlife. Each mummy may have represented a wish, a belief, or a hope from someone living at the time. It stands as powerful evidence of humanity's deep faith in gods, in death, and in life beyond death. And sometimes, it's precisely those beliefs that lead to creations so extraordinary that even the modern world can't help but marvel and keep asking questions. The tiny red-faced mummy, 2,600 years old, reveals a painful secret misunderstood for 40 years. Some mysteries are not hidden within massive pyramids or grand tombs, but in things so small they are almost overlooked. And this is one such case, a mummy so tiny you could hold it in your hands, yet one that has puzzled scientists for more than 40 years. This mummy quietly appeared in a collection at Swansea University, having been brought from ancient Egypt to Wales in 1971. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than an ordinary miniature mummy, but the closer researchers looked, the more something felt off. And it was precisely that unease that turned it into one of the most difficult mysteries to explain. The mummy is catalogued as W1013. What makes it stand out immediately is its size, only about 20 inches long. It is wrapped in stiff yellow linen, decorated with blue stripes with a broad collar and, most strikingly, a face painted red. That might sound typical, but these details confused experts. In ancient Egyptian customs, a red-painted face was usually reserved for adult males. So why would such a small mummy be prepared in this way? And more importantly, what exactly is it? Today, W1013 is housed at the Egypt Center at Swansea University. It is believed to date back to around 600 BCE, meaning it is over 2,600 years old. For more than 4 decades, experts studied and debated it. Some even argued that attempts to decipher the small inscriptions on the mummy were pointless, suspecting it might be a forgery created in the 19th century. Then came a turning point on April 28, 2014, when imaging specialist Paula Griffiths from the university's College of Medicine analyzed the mummy using CT scanning technology. The results surprised everyone. Inside the wrappings, most of the material was identified as linen, but deeper within, scientists observed a dark object about 4 inches long. This single detail opened up an entirely new line of explanation. Many experts now believe this could be a mummified fetus, still enclosed within the amniotic sac. Based on the size of the bones detected, especially the femur, they estimate the fetus was between 12 and 16 weeks old. This means W1013 is not a tiny mummy in the usual sense, but possibly a life that never had the chance to be born. The CT images also revealed something more, an amulet inside the mummy, an object typically placed with the dead to protect them in the afterlife. There was also another dark area resembling bead strands or decorative tassels. These details suggest this was not something created randomly, but rather part of a deliberate burial process with clear spiritual meaning. According to the Egypt Center, finding such objects inside a mummy is not unusual in ancient Egyptian culture. On the contrary, it reflects a perspective very different from that of the modern Western world. Today, the loss of a fetus is often handled more simply, but in ancient Egypt, unborn lives were still cared for and buried with ceremony and respect. A well-known example of this can be found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, where two small coffins containing fetuses were discovered, dating to the New Kingdom, around 1550 to 1070 BCE. These findings show that certain areas within tombs were reserved not only for children, but also for fetuses, even including placentas wrapped in blood-soaked cloth. When all of this evidence is put together, researchers, including Carolyn Graves Brown, have gradually leaned toward a deeply emotional hypothesis. W1013 may indeed be a fetus, a profound loss for a family more than 2,600 years ago, a loss so significant that they chose to mummify, bury, and mourn it with the utmost care and ritual. From an object once suspected to be a fake, dismissed for decades, it has ultimately revealed a deeply human story about loss, about love, and about how people confront death. And when you think about it, isn't this the kind of grief that even today we can still understand? The mysterious alien mummy found in Russia. Let me ask you this: if a creature less than 10 inches tall, with an unusually large head and eyes that take up almost its entire face, were discovered as an actual body, what would you think it was? A deformed child? A hoax? Or something humanity has never truly understood? If you're not sure, let's look at a real story that took place in the town of Kishtim in the Chelyabinsk Oblast, Russia, and see if we can get closer to an answer. In 1996, local police in this town discovered a small, strange-looking being. It had a large head, a distorted face, and oversized eyes that dominated its features, giving it an appearance many associated with what people often call an alien. From that moment on, the name the Kishtim alien began to spread. Medical experts soon became involved and conducted an autopsy to determine exactly what it was. The analysis was led by Dr. Stanislav Samoshkin, head of pathology at the local hospital. After careful examination, he reached a conclusion that surprised many. The creature was neither human nor any known animal. According to him, the skull structure was completely different. While a typical human skull consists of 6 main bones, this creature appeared to have only 4. Not only that, but its entire skeletal structure showed unusual characteristics that did not match any congenital deformities recognized by modern medicine. This led him to believe it could represent a previously unknown form of life. The creature measured about 10 inches in length, with a swollen and deformed head. Its eye sockets were extremely large, nearly covering the entire face, creating an appearance that would seem both strange and unsettling if you tried to imagine it. Interestingly, some researchers noted similarities between this being and another mysterious specimen known as Atta, discovered in the Atacama Desert in 2003. This resemblance further fueled speculation about the unclear origins of the Kishtim creature. However, despite various analyses, researchers have never been able to determine exactly where it came from. One person particularly interested in the case was Vadim Chernobrov, a researcher of UFOs and paranormal phenomena. He traveled from Moscow to examine the body and later declared it a groundbreaking discovery. Preliminary genetic analyses also suggested that the remains were not human, but ironically, these conclusions could never be fully verified. Before laboratories could conduct more in-depth studies, the body mysteriously disappeared. According to police reports, it may have been stolen from the hospital morgue. And from that point on, the story took a darker turn, filled with rumors and unsettling coincidences. A series of strange events followed, leading many to believe the mummy carried a curse. Tamara Prozvarina, who had been involved in discovering the creature, died in a traffic accident not long afterward. Chernobrov himself suffered a sudden paralysis from the waist down during his research. His health rapidly declined and he passed away soon after. And it didn't end there. Another scholar, Mark Milkiker, also became a victim. He fell seriously ill while investigating the case and later died of a heart attack after returning to Moscow. All of this has turned the story of the Kishtim alien into more than just a strange discovery. It has become a haunting mystery where the line between science and belief begins to blur. And to this day, the question remains unanswered. What was that creature really? An unknown form of life, or simply a mystery beyond our current ability to explain? What do you think the answer is? And how would you react if you were the first person to see it? Leave a comment below and let's discuss. 17. Tiny coffins containing miniature mummies in Scotland. When people think of mummies, they usually picture Egypt, pharaohs, and the famous art of mummification. But what if I told you that right in the United Kingdom, on a hill steeped in legend, there exist mummies no larger than the palm of your hand? Would you believe it? If not, let's head to Arthur's Seat, a hill located east of Edinburgh Castle in the city of Edinburgh, Scotland. This isn't just a famous landmark, it's also tied to legends of Camelot, the mythical castle of King Arthur. And it was here, in a place filled with myth, that a strange discovery was made in 1836. According to records from the Times dated July 20th, 1836, 5 boys out rabbit hunting stumbled upon an unusual rock formation. Curious, they crawled into a small cave, and what they saw left them frozen in place. In front of them were 17 tiny mummies. Unlike the large bandage-wrapped mummies most people imagine, these were incredibly small, each about 4 inches long. More precisely, they were 17 carved wooden figures, each placed inside its own small coffin. What's remarkable is that they were not crude. On the contrary, each figure was carefully dressed with detailed clothing resembling miniature human attire. And it doesn't stop there. The way they were arranged puzzled researchers even more. The 17 coffins were laid out in 3 horizontal rows, 2 rows of 8 and a third row containing just 1, a strange configuration, unlike anything seen in known burial practices. But here's the shocking part. When they were first discovered, the boys had no idea of their value. According to reports from the time, they even burned some of the coffins shortly afterward. Hard to believe, right? A major mystery almost destroyed from the very beginning. Fortunately, a professor named Ferguson managed to rescue the remaining coffins. He took them home and became the first to open them, discovering the small mummy-like figures inside. However, after that initial discovery, the story fell into silence. For more than 60 years, almost no research was recorded. The coffins were gradually lost, scattered across private collections, and their mystery faded into obscurity. It wasn't until 1901, 65 years later, that the story resurfaced. At that time, 8 of the original 17 coffins were rediscovered and transferred to the National Museum of Scotland. From there, serious scientific study finally began. Analysis showed that all the mummies were made of wood and carved with knives. One unusual detail stood out. Each figure was missing 1 arm. According to scientists, this may have been intentional, making it easier to dress them in clothing. Of the 8 remaining figures, only 3 were finally finished with smooth edges. From this, archaeologists concluded that at least 2 different individuals were involved in creating them. It doesn't end there. 2 experts, Simpson and Menifee, analyzed the clothing and discovered a crucial detail. The garments could not have been made before 1812, the time when cotton began replacing linen in Scotland. This means these mummies are not truly ancient as once believed. From that point, many theories emerged. Some locals believed they were witchcraft charms. Others thought they were protective talismans made by sailors before setting out to sea. But one theory stands out as especially chilling, linking the coffins to the infamous killers Burke and Hare from the early 19th century. The pair were believed to have murdered 17 victims, a number that eerily matches the 17 coffins. However, this theory also faces strong opposition. Of the victims, 12 were women, while most of the figures appear to be dressed in male-style clothing. And so, to this day, the mystery of the 17 tiny coffins at Arthur's Seat remains unsolved. No one knows exactly why they were made, and perhaps even more puzzling, where the remaining 9 coffins are today. So what do you think? Is this simply superstition or a message left behind by people of the past, one we still don't fully understand? As you can see, every skeleton, every mummy, and every ancient structure carries a story that makes us stop and think. The more we explore, the more we realize how little we truly know. So, which of these discoveries impressed you the most? Don't hesitate to leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any other fascinating discoveries. For now, goodbye and see you next time.